My name is Eleanor Hartwell. I'm 32 years old. 3 weeks ago, my parents stood up at their 40th wedding anniversary dinner and announced to 35 guests that they were taking the whole family to Hawaii for a second celebration. Everyone clapped. My sister squealed with excitement. I smiled, already imagining palm trees and ocean breezes, my first real vacation in years. Then I made the mistake of asking a simple question. What time is our flight? My father looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. My mother's smile tightened, and in front of every guest in that room, my dad said, "You don't need to know, Ellie. You're not part of this trip. Someone has to stay behind and take care of the kids." 35 pairs of eyes, 35 witnesses to the moment my family told me I wasn't really family at all. But here's what they didn't know. I had a secret, one I'd been building for 3 years, and that night, I decided it was finally time to use it. To understand why I walked away from everything I knew, let me take you back to the beginning, to the night that changed everything, and the family that made me invisible long before they said it out loud. The Hartwell family lives in a white colonial house in the suburbs of Boston. 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, lawn trimmed to HOA perfection. The kind of house that screams, "We made it," to anyone driving by. My father, Richard Hartwell, retired 3 years ago from his position as a branch manager at a regional bank. My mother, Diane, has never worked a paid job in her life, but she'll tell you she's busier than any CEO, chairing the church women's committee, organizing neighborhood fundraisers, maintaining what she calls our family's reputation. Then there's my sister Brooke, 3 years younger than me, married to Tyler Preston, a corporate attorney at a firm downtown whose name she drops into every conversation. They have 2 kids, a 5-year-old named Mason and a 3-year-old named Lily, and a brand new Lexus SUV that always gets the prime spot in our parents' driveway. My Honda Civic, the one I've been driving for 10 years, it gets parked on the street. "Ellie, move your car," my mother would say whenever I visited. "Tyler's bringing the Lexus, and guests notice what's in the driveway first." I never questioned it. I just moved my car. That's the thing about being the invisible one in your family. You stop noticing all the small ways they've already decided you don't matter. The nicer parking spot, the better seat at the table, the way your mother introduces your sister to guests by her husband's job title, while you're just Ellie, she helps out. I work as a part-time accountant. Mostly remote clients, flexible hours, modest income. Nothing impressive by Hartwell family standards. But I never told them about the other thing I do. The thing I started 3 years ago after my life fell apart in a different way. I never told them I'd learned to see. The preparation for my parents' anniversary party started a week before. I took 3 days off from my accounting clients to help set up. I ordered flowers, white roses and peonies per my mother's specifications. I hand-wrote 60 place cards in the calligraphy she insisted upon. I coordinated with the caterer, pressed the tablecloths, polished the Waterford crystal glasses that had been a wedding gift 40 years ago. On the day of the party, I arrived at 7 a.m. I wore jeans and a t-shirt because there was no point dressing up when I'd be in the kitchen for the next 10 hours. By 6 p.m., the house looked perfect. Candles glowed on every surface. The dining table stretched across the living room, set for 35 with my mother's finest china. I had changed into a simple black dress. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would draw attention. "Ellie." My mother's voice caught me in the hallway. She looked me up and down, frowning. "Is that what you're wearing?" "It's black. I thought it was appropriate." "It's fine, I suppose." She smoothed her own ivory dress, a designer piece that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Just stay in the background. Today is about your father and me." I nodded. I always nodded. Guests began arriving at 7. The men in sports coats, the women in cocktail dresses. Old colleagues, church friends, neighbors whose lawns were as immaculate as ours. 35 people who thought they knew the Hartwell family. None of them knew me at all. I circulated with appetizers, refilled wine glasses, answered questions from guests who didn't recognize me. "Are you with the catering company?" one woman asked, reaching for a crab cake. Before I could answer, my mother appeared. "Oh, that's Ellie, my other daughter. She's helping out tonight." The woman smiled politely and turned away. My mother didn't notice. She never noticed. Brooke arrived at 7:15, perfectly timed for maximum impact. She swept through the front door in a red wrap dress, Diane von Furstenberg, she'd announced to anyone who asked, with Tyler behind her in a charcoal suit and their two children dressed like catalog models. My mother rushed to embrace her, exclaiming over how beautiful she looked, how handsome Tyler was, how precious the grandchildren were. I watched from the kitchen doorway, holding a tray of bruschetta that was getting cold because no one had taken any from me in the past 10 minutes. "Everyone, you remember my daughter Brooke and her husband Tyler?" my mother announced to the room, her voice carrying the particular warmth she reserved for moments of public pride. "Tyler's a partner at Whitmore and Associates. They just made him partner last year. We're so proud." Applause, smiles, congratulations. I watched Brooke accept a glass of champagne, watched her tilt her head just so when she laughed at something a guest said, watched her exist in that room like she belonged there. Because she did. She always had. My mother never mentioned that I was the one who'd done Tyler's taxes for 3 years. Free of charge, naturally. Never mentioned that I'd spent 14 hours over 3 weekends helping them find their current house, or that I'd taken a week off work to help them move in. Those weren't the kinds of contributions that got announced at parties. Those were just things Ellie did, things everyone expected. At one point, Tyler approached me with Lily squirming in his arms and Mason tugging at his jacket. "Hey, can you take them? Brooke and I need to mingle." Not, "Would you mind?" Not, "Thank you." Just, "Can you take them?" Like passing off luggage. I took them. I fed them dinner in the kitchen. I wiped Lily's face when she spilled juice on her dress. I told Mason 3 stories to keep him from running into the living room and disrupting the party. When I finally emerged, dessert was being served. I hadn't eaten anything all day. No one had thought to save me a plate. The announcement came at 9 o'clock, right after my mother's tiramisu was served. My father stood up, tapping his champagne glass with a fork. The room fell silent. 35 faces turned toward him with expectant smiles. "Patricia and I want to thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice warm with rehearsed charm. 40 years of marriage. 4 decades of building this family, this life, this home. My mother beamed beside him. Brooke reached for Tyler's hand. I stood near the kitchen doorway, still holding a dirty dessert plate. "And to celebrate this milestone," my father continued, "we have a surprise announcement." He paused for effect. My mother's eyes sparkled. "Next week, we're taking the whole family to Hawaii. 1 week at the Four Seasons in Maui. A second celebration, just the Hartwells." The room erupted in appreciative murmurs. "How wonderful! What a gift! You two deserve it." Brooke actually squealed. "Dad, that's amazing! The kids are going to love it." I felt something lift in my chest. The whole family. That meant me, too. For once, I wouldn't be cooking, cleaning, or babysitting. I'd actually be included. I stepped forward, allowing myself a small smile. "That sounds incredible. What time is our flight?" The question hung in the air. My father's expression shifted. He glanced at my mother. Something passed between them. A look I'd seen 1,000 times but never understood until that moment. "Ellie," he said slowly, "you don't need to know the flight time." The room went quiet. Not the comfortable silence of anticipation, but the tense quiet of something going wrong. "I don't understand," I heard myself say. My father cleared his throat. "Because you're not going." 35 pairs of eyes. That's how many people watched my father tell me I wasn't part of the family vacation. I could feel them all. The weight of their gazes pressing against my skin. Mrs. Patterson from the church committee, who always complimented my mother on having such a helpful older daughter. The Hendersons from next door, who'd watched me mow my parents' lawn every summer while Brooke sunbathed by the pool. My father's former colleagues, men in expensive watches who probably didn't even know my name. The room seemed to shrink around me. The candles flickered. Someone coughed. "Someone needs to stay behind," my mother added, as if this were the most logical thing in the world. Her voice was patient, the way you'd explain something simple to a slow child. "Brooke and Tyler need a real vacation. That means you'll watch the children." A real vacation, as if any vacation that included me wouldn't be real. But I started. Ellie, honestly? My mother's tone sharpened, a warning edge that I'd learned to recognize decades ago, the sound that meant, don't embarrass me. You don't have anything important to do. Brooke works hard. She deserves a break. Brooke works hard. Brooke, who hadn't held a job since Mason was born. Brooke, who had a nanny 3 days a week and still complained about being exhausted. It's just a week, Tyler added, not even looking at me. The kids love you. I stood there in my plain black dress, holding a dirty plate, while 35 people watched me be dismissed from my own family. Some of them looked uncomfortable. Most of them just looked away. One woman, I didn't know her name, leaned toward her husband and whispered something. He nodded. I caught the words, "Poor thing, she must be used to it by now." The champagne glass in my hand trembled. I set down the plate, set down the glass, because I didn't trust myself not to drop them. "Of course," I heard myself say. "I understand." I smiled, the smile I'd learned to wear after 32 years of being the one who helps out, the one who doesn't complain, the one who is always, always just there. But something inside me had finally cracked. Not broken. Cracked. Like a fault line shifting before an earthquake. I excused myself to the kitchen. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. And for the first time in my life, I started making a different kind of plan. The party continued without me. Of course it did. I stayed in the kitchen, mechanically washing dishes while laughter and conversation drifted in from the living room. At some point, Brooke appeared, her red dress swishing against the door frame. "Ellie, don't be upset," she said, reaching for my arm. "You know how it is. Tyler and I really need this time together. It's been so stressful lately with the kids." I kept washing. "I understand. Besides, you're so good with Mason and Lily, they'll barely notice we're gone." I rinsed a champagne glass, set it in the drying rack, said nothing. Brooke sighed, the way she always does when she thinks I'm being difficult. "Look, it's just a week and you don't have, like, a boyfriend or anything tying you down. Your schedule is flexible." Flexible, that word again, as if my time had no value because I chose how to spend it. "Tyler made a list," she continued, pulling out her phone. "Their schedules, food allergies. Lily can't have strawberries, remember? And there's this new thing with Mason's ear. He might need drops. I'll text you everything." She didn't ask if I was willing. She just assumed. That's when Tyler appeared, loosening his tie. "All sorted? Great. We're heading out early tomorrow to pack. Brooke, your mother wants photos before we leave." They were gone before I could respond. Not that I would have. Not that I ever did. But as I stood there alone in my mother's kitchen, staring at the list of instructions Brooke had just texted me, a single thought crystallized in my mind. They don't see me as family. They see me as staff, and staff can resign. It was almost midnight when I found the emails. The last guests had finally left. My parents had gone to bed, exhausted from accepting 40 years' worth of congratulations. I was alone in the living room, folding tablecloths, when I realized I needed to send a file to a client whose deadline I'd pushed back for this party. My laptop was at home. My mother's was on the kitchen counter. She won't mind, I told myself. She'd borrowed my things 1,000 times without asking. I opened the laptop. Safari was already running, and there it was, my mother's Gmail, still logged in. I should have clicked away immediately. I should have minded my own business. But I saw my name in the subject line of a recent thread. Hawaii arrangements, Ellie situation. My finger hovered over the trackpad. I knew I shouldn't. I knew whatever I found would hurt. I clicked anyway. The thread was between my mother and Brooke, starting a week before the party. From Diane Hartwell to Brooke Hartwell Preston. "Keep Ellie here to watch the kids. She doesn't have anything important to do anyway. Tyler was right. It's like having free help. She should be grateful we give her something to do." And Brooke's reply, "Totally agree, Mom. She'll probably feel useful for once. It's kind of sad, honestly, but at least it works out for us." I read those words 3 times to make sure I understood them. Free help. The phrase echoed in my head like a bell tolling. She should be grateful. Grateful. For being used. for being invisible except when they needed something. Kind of sad. They pitied me. My own mother and sister looked at my life, a life I'd shaped around their needs, their schedules, their convenience, and they pitied me. The kitchen was completely dark now except for the glow of the laptop screen. I could hear the old house settling around me, the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the distant hum of the refrigerator. Normal sounds in a house that suddenly felt like enemy territory. I took screenshots. I emailed them to myself. I deleted my email from the sent folder and cleared the browser history. Then I sat in my mother's dark kitchen, the house where I'd grown up, where I'd spent countless hours cooking and cleaning and being helpful, and finally let myself understand exactly what I was to them. Not a daughter, not a sister, a convenience. I drove home at 1 o'clock in the morning through empty streets. My apartment was small, a one-bedroom in a building that hadn't been updated since the 90s. Beige carpet, white walls, furniture I'd bought secondhand. My mother had called it depressing the one time she visited, but it was mine. The only space where I could breathe. I sat in the darkness for a long time, staring at my phone. An email I hadn't answered glowed on the screen, from Daniel Thorne, owner of Coastal Light Gallery in Monterey. Ms. Hartwell, I've been following your Instagram account for several months now. The Invisible Women series is extraordinary. I'd be very interested in discussing a potential solo exhibition of your work. 3 weeks ago, I'd received this email and almost deleted it as spam. I'd answered briefly but never followed up, because good things didn't happen to people like me. I picked up my phone and called the only person who would understand. Aunt Jenny answered on the second ring, even though it was past midnight. "Ellie, what's wrong?" I told her everything. The announcement, the humiliation, the emails. My voice cracked exactly once, when I read aloud the words, "free help." When I finished, there was silence on the line. Then Aunt Jenny said something I'll never forget. "Ellie, I have a spare room above the cafe. I need help with the morning shift anyway, and that gallery? It's 20 minutes from my place." "Aunt Jenny, I can't just—" "Yes, you can. You can leave. You can choose yourself for once. The only person stopping you is you." Let me tell you about Aunt Virginia, Jenny as she prefers. She's my mother's younger sister and what my mother calls the family disappointment. Jenny never married. She followed her passion for ceramics instead of getting a real job. 20 years ago, she moved to Carmel by the Sea, a small artist community on the California coast, to open a small cafe with a pottery studio in the back. The Ceramic Cup, she called it. Blue shutters, hand-lettered sign, lavender spilling from window boxes. My mother hasn't forgiven her since. Jenny threw away her potential, my mother likes to say at every family gathering. Jenny doesn't attend, which is all of them. She could have had a good life, but she chose to play with clay. She could have married well, had children, been somebody. Instead, she lives alone in some tourist town making coffee cups. The way my mother says it, you'd think Jenny had committed a crime. But here's what my mother doesn't know. I've been calling Aunt Jenny every Sunday night for 7 years. Every single Sunday, without fail, I dial her number and we talk for an hour. Sometimes 2. She tells me about the ocean, about her students, about the way the light hits the cypress trees at sunset. I tell her things I've never told anyone, about feeling invisible, about wondering if something is wrong with me, about the emptiness that sits in my chest like a stone. She listens. She actually listens. It was Aunt Jenny who first saw my photographs. I'd sent her one, just one, testing the waters. And her response made me cry. "Ellie, this is extraordinary. You have a gift." Nobody had ever called anything I did extraordinary. She was the one who encouraged me to keep shooting, to keep posting. And she was the one who, 3 weeks before my parents' anniversary, said something that changed everything. "Ellie, I hope you don't mind, but I sent your Instagram link to someone, a gallery owner I know in Monterey. His name is Daniel Thorne. He's looking for emerging artists." I nearly dropped the phone. "Aunt Jenny, that's the gallery that emailed me." "I know, sweetheart. He told me he wants to talk to you about a solo exhibition." Silence, my heart pounding. "But that's real. That's an actual career thing." "Yes, it is." Her voice was gentle but firm. And you deserve it. You don't need anyone's permission to pursue what you love. I learned that lesson late. You don't have to. That night, I'd replied to Daniel Thorne's email, but I hadn't followed up. I hadn't believed it could be real. Now, sitting in my dark apartment after the worst night of my life, I pulled up that email thread again. Daniel had responded 2 days ago. Ms. Hartwell, I'm delighted you're interested. I'd love to meet in person to discuss the exhibition. We're looking at a potential opening in 6 weeks. Please let me know when you might be available to visit the gallery. 6 weeks, a solo exhibition. My photographs on actual gallery walls. I looked around my apartment, the beige carpet, the secondhand furniture, the life I'd been living for everyone else. Then I looked at my phone, at Aunt Jenny's number still on screen. Aunt Jenny, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I'll be there in 5 days. I hung up at 2 o'clock in the morning. By 6 o'clock a.m., I'd started packing. 3 suitcases, my camera equipment, my laptop, the cashmere scarf that had wrapped my Canon for 3 years, the same scarf I'd bought at a thrift store the week after Kevin left, the same one that had protected my secret through countless family dinners and holidays and moments when I'd wanted to scream, but smiled instead. I left behind the world's best aunt apron. Brooke had given it to me 3 Christmases ago, wrapped in tissue paper like it was something precious. I'd worn it every single time I came over to cook, clean, and babysit. Every single time. Let them find someone else to wear it now. Standing in my apartment as the sun came up, I thought about what I was doing. Leaving Boston, leaving my family, walking away from 32 years of being the one who helped out, the one who stayed behind, the one who never complained. They'll be angry, I thought. They'll call me selfish. They'll say I'm tearing the family apart. My mother's voice echoed in my head. Family comes first, Ellie. We all make sacrifices. But I was the only one who ever made them. Then I remembered those emails. Free help. Kind of sad. The casual cruelty of it. Not even angry, not even hateful. Just dismissive. Like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be considered. They'd already torn me out of the family. They'd done it so slowly, so thoroughly, that even I hadn't noticed until they said it out loud in front of 35 strangers. I wasn't running away. I was finally running toward something. 32 years I'd tried to fit into the space they made for me, a space that got smaller every year until I nearly disappeared. But tonight, I understood something. I didn't disappear. I was erased, deliberately, by the people who were supposed to love me most. And I have a secret I've been building for 3 years, in the darkness where no one bothered to look. It's time to step into the light. I looked around my apartment one last time. The second-hand couch where I'd sat alone so many nights, the beige carpet that my mother had sneered at, the small kitchen where I'd taught myself to cook, not because anyone encouraged me, but because someone had to make the Thanksgiving turkey, and that someone was always going to be me. The life I'd lived for other people. Outside my window, Boston was waking up, cars starting, people heading to jobs, to families, to lives they'd chosen for themselves. I was about to choose mine. Then I picked up my bags, walked out the door, and didn't look back. For the first time in 32 years, I was choosing myself. To understand the secret I've been keeping, I need to take you back 3 years. Back to when my life fell apart in a different way, and something new grew from the wreckage. His name was Nathan Reed. We'd been together for 4 years. 4 years of dinners and movie nights and lazy Sunday mornings. 4 years of talking about marriage, about children, about the house we'd buy someday with a backyard big enough for a dog. He was an accountant, too. That's how we met, at a conference in Hartford. He had kind eyes and a quiet laugh, and he made me feel, for the first time in my life, like someone actually saw me. I should have known it was too good to last. It was a Tuesday evening. I remember that specifically because Tuesdays were our pizza nights. We'd order from the same place every week, argue playfully about toppings, watch whatever show we were binging at the time. But that Tuesday, there was no pizza. Nathan was sitting on the couch when I got home, and something in his posture told me everything before he said a word. "We need to talk," he said. Those 4 words. the death knell of every relationship. I sat down across from him, my heart already sinking. Okay. He didn't look at me. He looked at his hands, at the floor, at anywhere but my face. Ellie, I love you. I do, but I don't think I'm in love with you anymore. The words hung in the air like smoke. I don't understand, I said, even though I did. Even though part of me had been waiting for this moment my entire life. The moment someone finally confirmed what I'd always suspected about myself. It's just... He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated, searching for words that wouldn't hurt too much, even though we both knew they would. You're always just there, Ellie. You're always just there, like furniture, like wallpaper. I come home and you're there, and we eat dinner and you're there, and we go to bed and you're there, but I don't feel like you're really there. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understood perfectly. I was invisible even to the man who supposedly loved me. You never push back, he continued, gaining momentum now, like he'd been holding this in for months. You never tell me what you want. You just accommodate. You accommodate everyone all the time. Your family calls and you drop everything. Your mother needs something and you're out the door. It's like you don't have your own life. You're just filling in the gaps in everyone else's. Every word was a knife, and the worst part was that I couldn't argue, because he was right. He was exactly right. I'm sorry, Nathan said, finally meeting my eyes. There was genuine sadness there, but also relief. The relief of finally saying something he'd been swallowing for too long. I really am, but I can't keep pretending this is enough. He packed a bag that night, said he'd get the rest of his stuff later. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Not a slam, just a click, and suddenly I was alone in an apartment that felt far too quiet. I didn't cry. Not then. I sat on the couch for hours, staring at nothing, replaying his words in my head. Always just there. Like furniture, like wallpaper. Was that really all I was? Background noise in everyone's life, including my own? The pawn shop was 3 blocks from my apartment. I'd walked past it 100 times without ever going in. Just another storefront with dusty windows and a flickering open sign. But a week after Nathan left, I found myself pushing through its door without really knowing why. Maybe I was looking for something to fill the hole he'd left behind. Maybe I just wanted to be somewhere no one knew me, surrounded by objects that had once belonged to strangers. Objects with histories I'd never know. Objects that had been given up, traded away, abandoned. Just like me. The shop was cramped and dim, smelling of dust and old leather. Musical instruments hung from the ceiling. Jewelry glittered under glass cases. Old books lined one wall, their spines cracked and faded. And there, on a shelf near the back, almost hidden behind a tarnished saxophone, was a camera. A Canon DSLR, used but well maintained. The price tag said $180. I picked it up without thinking. It was heavier than I expected. Solid, substantial, real in a way nothing in my life felt real anymore. The lens caught the light from the window, and something stirred in my chest. A feeling I couldn't name. Like recognition. Like coming home to a place I'd never been. That's a good one, the shop owner said from behind the counter. An old man with thick glasses and nicotine-stained fingers. He watched me with the casual interest of someone who'd seen 1,000 customers pick up 1,000 objects. Previous owner was a professional, wedding photographer, treated it like a baby for 15 years, only sold it because his arthritis got too bad to hold it steady. I turned the camera over in my hands, examining it from every angle. Why do you want it? The old man asked. I didn't have an answer. I just knew that I did. I bought it with money I should have saved. Money I'd been setting aside for the wedding that was never going to happen. The old man wrapped it in newspaper and handed it to me like he was passing on something sacred. Whatever you're looking for, he said, I hope you find it. I told no one about the camera. Not my mother, not Brooke, not anyone. This was mine. The first thing I'd chosen just for myself in longer than I could remember. That camera became my secret. At first, I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never taken a photography class, never owned anything fancier than a smartphone. I just walked around the city with this heavy, beautiful machine hanging from my neck, looking at the world through a lens that suddenly made everything different. I started noticing things I'd never noticed before. The way light fell through subway grates, casting prison bar shadows on the platform below. The expressions on people's faces when they thought no one was watching. The weariness, the loneliness, the quiet desperation that modern life breeds in all of us. I started photographing people. Not the obvious subjects, not the beautiful or the powerful or the interesting. I photographed the invisible ones. The people society looks right through without seeing. An elderly woman at a bus stop waiting alone with her groceries. Her face was a map of wrinkles and quiet dignity, and she sat there for 40 minutes while dozens of people walked past without a glance. I photographed her from across the street, catching the exact moment she checked her watch and sighed. A small gesture of resignation that broke my heart. A night janitor mopping the floor of an office building at 2 a.m. I'd been walking, unable to sleep, and I saw her through the window. This middle-aged woman in a blue uniform, invisible to everyone who worked in that building during the day. I asked if I could take her picture. She looked confused, then suspicious, then oddly pleased. "No one's ever asked to photograph me before," she said. A street vendor with calloused hands selling hot dogs from a cart that he'd probably been pushing for 30 years. The lunch crowd swarmed around him, grabbing their food and rushing away without making eye contact. I photographed his hands, those working hands that had served thousands of people who never bothered to learn his name, people who society looks right through, the same way my family looked right through me. I called the series Invisible Women, not because all my subjects were women, they weren't, but because the title felt true. We live in a world that renders certain people invisible, the old, the poor, the plain, the ones who help out instead of standing out, the ones who serve instead of being served. I knew what it felt like to be invisible, and now, through my camera, I was making them visible. I created an anonymous Instagram account. No face, no real name, just the photographs. I posted 3 or 4 times a week, always late at night when I couldn't sleep. I didn't expect anyone to care. But slowly, something started to happen. People found me. Not many at first, a handful of followers, then a few dozen, then a few hundred. They left comments that made me cry. "This is exactly how I feel every day. Thank you for seeing it. My grandmother looks just like this woman. I'm calling her tonight. You capture something real. Please don't stop." Over 3 years, I gathered 12,000 followers, people who saw what I saw, people who understood. I kept the camera wrapped in an old cashmere scarf at the back of my closet behind winter coats and boxes of old papers. No one in my family knew it existed. No one in my family knew that while I was cooking their Thanksgiving turkeys and wrapping their Christmas presents and babysitting their children, I was also building something of my own, something that was mine alone. Let me paint you a picture of what my life looked like from the outside. Thanksgiving. I arrive at 6 a.m. to start the turkey. The streets are still dark, the house still quiet except for my footsteps in the kitchen. I set the table with my mother's Wedgwood china, the set I'm not allowed to use, only to wash. Each plate, each glass, each piece of silverware placed according to my mother's exact specifications. I arrange the flowers, polish the silver, coordinate the timing of 7 side dishes so everything comes out hot at exactly the same moment. It's a logistical operation worthy of a military commander, and I execute it flawlessly every single year. Brooke arrives at noon in a cashmere sweater, kisses everyone hello, and sits down to be served. She compliments the food. She accepts praise for the beautiful table setting. Not once does she enter the kitchen. Christmas. Same routine, plus wrapping all the presents my mother bought because her arthritis is acting up. Funny how her arthritis never stops her from playing bridge 3 times a week, or from spending 4 hours shopping for those presents in the first place. I spend Christmas Eve assembling toys for Mason and Lily, those impossible toys with 1,000 pieces and instructions written by sadists, while Brooke and Tyler enjoy a date night at some expensive restaurant downtown. On Christmas morning, the kids tear open their gifts without knowing or caring that Aunt Ellie was the one who wrapped each one with careful precision, who spent hours finding the perfect paper, the perfect ribbon, the perfect tags. Brooke takes photos for Instagram. My mother beams, and I collect the wrapping paper scraps and take out the trash. Birthday parties. I'm the entertainment coordinator, the cleanup crew, and the backup babysitter all in one. Last year, I spent 8 hours running Mason's dinosaur-themed party while Brooke got a manicure because she needed a break. I organized Pin the Tail on the T-Rex. I supervised the bounce house during the near disaster when a kid got stuck. I cut the cake and served it to 20 screaming 5-year-olds while managing food allergies and dietary restrictions I'd memorized for other people's children. When it was over, the house trashed, the kids sugar crashed, the parents slowly collecting their exhausted offspring, Brooke came home with fresh nails and asked why I looked so tired. "It's just a kid's party," she said. How hard could it be? The time I tried to say no, once, just once, I asked if maybe, just maybe, I could skip a family event because I had a deadline for a client. An important client. A deadline I'd already extended twice because of other family obligations. My mother's voice went cold. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Family comes first, Ellie. We all make sacrifices." Except I'm the only one who ever seems to make them. Brooke never sacrificed a manicure appointment. Tyler never sacrificed a work call. My mother never sacrificed a bridge game. But I was expected to sacrifice everything, always, without complaint, because that's what Ellie does. That's who Ellie is. But here's what they didn't see. After every family dinner, I'd drive home and take out my camera. Sometimes I'd walk for hours, shooting until my fingers were numb from the cold. The streets of Boston at night became my studio, the empty sidewalks, the glowing windows, the solitary figures moving through the dark. Every Sunday night, I called Aunt Jenny. Those calls were my lifeline. She was the only person who knew about the photography, the only one who'd seen my work. The first time I sent her a photograph, just one testing the waters, her response made me cry for an hour. "Ellie, this is extraordinary. You have a gift. Why haven't you told anyone?" "Because they wouldn't understand," I said. "Because they'd find a way to make it about them or dismiss it or ask why I'm wasting time on something that doesn't make money." "Then don't tell them," she said simply. "Keep it for yourself. Nurture it. Let it grow in the dark until it's strong enough to survive their opinions." So that's what I did. For 3 years, I lived 2 lives. The daytime Ellie who helped out, who showed up, who smiled and nodded and never complained, and the nighttime Ellie who wandered the city with a camera, who saw the world differently, who was slowly, secretly, building something beautiful. Do you want to know when I realized the truth about my family? It wasn't a dramatic moment. There was no explosion, no confrontation. It was a random Tuesday evening while I was scrubbing my mother's Le Creuset pot after yet another family dinner that I'd cooked and served and cleaned up alone. I was standing at the sink, hands in soapy water, and it hit me like a wave of cold. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had invited me somewhere without expecting me to work. Not a dinner where I was a guest, not a party where I could relax, not a vacation where I wasn't responsible for someone else's children. Every invitation came with invisible strings attached. Come for Thanksgiving meant, come cook Thanksgiving. Join us for Christmas meant, join us to serve Christmas. We'd love to have you at the kid's birthday meant, we'd love to have you run the kid's birthday. I wasn't family. I was staff they didn't have to pay. And the worst part? I'd let it happen. I'd let it happen for so long that I didn't even notice anymore. The gradual erosion of my boundaries, the slow disappearance of my own needs, it had all seemed so normal, so inevitable. What else would Ellie do? She doesn't have anything important going on. Standing at that sink, I made myself a promise. I would keep building my secret life. I would keep growing my skills, my following, my confidence. And someday, I didn't know when, but someday I would be ready to step out of the shadows. I just didn't know the opportunity would come so soon. 2 days before my family's Hawaii trip, I drove to my parents' house one last time. My mother was in the living room, coordinating outfits for the vacation. A rainbow of sundresses and swimsuits spread across the couch like a fabric explosion. Brooke sat nearby, scrolling through resort reviews on her phone, occasionally holding up her screen to show my mother some amenity that excited her. Tyler was upstairs somewhere, probably on a work call. My father was reading the paper in his armchair the way he always did, present in body, absent in attention. "I need to tell you something," I said from the doorway. My mother barely looked up. "If it's about the children's schedule, Brooke already sent it to you." "It's not about that." I steadied my voice. "I'm not watching the kids. I won't be available." That got their attention. Brooke's head snapped up. My mother's hands froze over a pile of sundresses. Even my father lowered his newspaper a few inches. "What do you mean, not available?" my mother asked. "I have a work opportunity in California. I'm leaving tomorrow." "California?" My father's voice finally engaged. "What kind of work opportunity?" "It's professional, something I've been working toward." I didn't owe them the details. I didn't owe them anything. "I'll be gone for the foreseeable future." Brooke's face twisted into something between confusion and outrage. "Ellie, you can't be serious. I'm counting on you. We all planned around this." "You planned around me without asking me," I said quietly. "I'm not canceling my life because you assumed I didn't have one." The silence in that room was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the distant hum of Tyler's voice from upstairs. Then my mother stood up, her voice cold as January. "This is incredibly selfish, Ellie. Brooke needs your help. She's pregnant again. Did she tell you? Number 3, and you're just going to abandon her?" I looked at Brooke, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Congratulations," I said evenly. "That doesn't change anything." "Family comes first," my mother snapped. "That's how we raised you." "Family comes first," I repeated. "Except when it came to inviting me to Hawaii, remember? So which is it? Am I family or aren't I?" Neither of them had an answer. My father cleared his throat. That particular throat clear that meant he was about to deliver a pronouncement. "Ellie, if you leave now, don't expect us to welcome you back with open arms. Actions have consequences." I looked at him, this man who had helped create me, who had provided for me financially but never emotionally, who had watched me disappear into the background of my own family without ever saying a word. "I understand," I said, and for the first time in my life, I meant it. I understood that they would never see me, that they didn't want to see me, that I had been a convenience, not a daughter, for so long that none of us knew the difference anymore. "Goodbye," I said. "I'll let you know when I'm settled." I turned and walked toward the door. "Ellie!" my mother called after me, her voice sharp. "Ellie, you come back here. We're not finished discussing this." But we were finished. We'd been finished for years. They just hadn't noticed. Then, something happened that I didn't expect. As I reached for the front door, my father's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered. "Mother, is everything all right?" My grandmother, Dorothy Hartwell, 89 years old, sharp as a tack, despite living in an assisted care facility in Connecticut. She rarely called. She preferred letters, handwritten in her elegant script on cream-colored stationery. So a phone call meant something was wrong, or something was important. My father put the phone on speaker, probably out of habit. "Richard, I just received a rather interesting email." Grandma Dorothy's voice filled the room, thin with age but still commanding. The same voice that had raised 5 children, buried 2 husbands, and survived things my generation couldn't imagine. "From your daughter, Eleanor." Everyone went still. I hadn't sent any email to my grandmother. I had no idea what she was talking about. "She sent me photographs, Richard. Beautiful photographs. I had no idea our Ellie was an artist." Understanding dawned. Aunt Jenny. Jenny had sent my portfolio to Grandma Dorothy without telling me. Another act of quiet rebellion. Another thread of support I hadn't known I had. "What photographs?" my mother asked, her voice tight with suspicion. "Pictures of people. Remarkable pictures. There's one of an old woman at a bus stop. It made me cry, Richard. Actually cry. I haven't cried over a photograph since your father died." A pause. When did Ellie learn to do this? My father looked at me, genuinely confused. I don't know." "Of course you don't know," Grandma Dorothy said, and there was an edge in her voice now. The edge of a woman who had seen too much, forgiven too much, and was finally running out of patience. You've never asked. None of you have ever asked what Ellie does, have you? What she cares about, what she dreams of. Silence. I've known that girl for 32 years, Grandma Dorothy continued. I've watched her grow up quiet and helpful and overlooked. I've watched her serve at every family gathering while Brooke sits like a princess. I've watched her give and give and give while the rest of you take without thinking. And I've said nothing because I told myself it wasn't my place, that I was just an old woman in a nursing home who should mind her own business. Her voice hardened. I was wrong. I also heard about the Hawaii situation. Her tone sharpened further. Jenny told me everything. You excluded your daughter from a family vacation so she could babysit, and you announced this publicly, in front of guests? My mother's face flushed. Mother Hartwell, that's not exactly— Don't Mother Hartwell me, Diane. I'm too old for diplomacy. I'm 89 years old. I've earned the right to speak plainly. Grandma Dorothy's voice crackled through the speaker like lightning. I remember when Richard was young and made a mistake, and I helped him fix it. But this isn't a mistake you made, is it? This is a pattern. This is years of treating one daughter like a servant while the other one sits on a throne. That's not fair, Brooke said, her voice small and defensive. Life isn't fair, Brooke, but family should try to be. Grandma Dorothy paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer but no less firm. I'm going to tell you all something, and I want you to listen carefully. If you let Ellie go without acknowledging what you've done, without even trying to make it right, you will regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but someday, when it's too late, you'll realize what you lost. Another pause. The clock ticked. No one moved. I made that mistake once before with Jenny. I let your mother push her away, and I didn't speak up when I should have. It took me 10 years to rebuild that relationship. 10 years I'll never get back. Her voice cracked just slightly. I won't make that mistake again. Then, Ellie, are you there? I'm here, Grandma, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Go to California, sweetheart. Chase your dream, and know that at least one person in this family sees you. I always have. The line went dead. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. My mother sat down heavily on the couch. Brooke stared at her phone like she'd forgotten it existed. My father stood frozen, the newspaper still dangling from one hand. I didn't wait for them to recover. I walked out the front door, got in my Honda Civic, and drove away. This time, I didn't look back. The drive from Boston to Carmel by the Sea takes about 45 hours if you push it. I didn't push it. I took 5 days, stopping at roadside motels with flickering vacancy signs, eating at diners where nobody knew my name and nobody expected anything from me. For the first time in years, I was anonymous. I was free. I could sit at a counter and drink coffee for an hour without anyone asking when I'd be done, without anyone needing me to be somewhere else. The first night, I stayed at a motel in upstate New York. The room smelled like cigarettes and industrial cleaner, and the bedspread had a pattern that had probably been ugly even in 1985. But I slept better than I had in months. No one knew where I was. No one could reach me. The silence was extraordinary. The second day, I drove through Pennsylvania and Ohio, watching the landscape slowly flatten. Forests gave way to farms. Mountains became hills, became plains. I listened to the radio, then turned it off and drove in silence, letting my thoughts unspool like ribbon. Somewhere in Indiana, I stopped at a truck stop diner for lunch. The menu was laminated and sticky, the coffee was burnt, and the booth was the most comfortable place I'd ever sat, because no one there wanted anything from me except my order. I took out my camera and photographed the cook through the kitchen window, a heavy-set man in a grease-stained apron, flipping burgers with the mechanical precision of someone who'd done the same motion a million times. He didn't notice me. No one noticed me. It felt like freedom. Somewhere in Nebraska, I pulled over at a rest stop just as the sun was setting, painting the prairie in shades of gold and pink that seemed impossible, like someone had spilled watercolors across the sky. I got out of my car and stood there in the warm evening air, watching the light change, watching the colors deepen and fade. The highway stretched out in both directions. Behind me, the life I'd left. Ahead of me, the life I was choosing. A semi-truck roared past, then another. The wind from their passage whipped my hair around my face, and in that moment, standing alone in the middle of nowhere, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt small, but not in a bad way. Small in the way that meant the universe was vast and full of possibility. Small in the way that meant my problems, my family's dismissal, Nathan's abandonment, all those years of invisibility were just one tiny story among billions. The world didn't revolve around the Hartwells of Boston. The world didn't care about their opinions, their judgment, their casual cruelty. The world was wide open, and I could go anywhere. I took out my camera. For the first time since I'd started this secret hobby, I photographed something that wasn't a person. I photographed the horizon, the light, the impossible beauty of an ordinary evening in the middle of nowhere. My first shot as a free woman. On the third day, I turned my phone back on to check directions. The notifications flooded in, missed calls, voicemails, text messages. I ignored most of them, but one text from Brooke caught my eye. Mom says if you're not home when we get back from Hawaii, you're dead to her. I read it once, then I deleted it. She was already treating me like I was dead anyway. At least now I'd be alive somewhere else. On the fourth day, I stopped for lunch at a diner in Arizona. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that probably hadn't worked since the 80s. I ordered coffee and a club sandwich and sat by the window watching trucks roll past on the highway. The waitress was a woman in her 60s with tired eyes and a name tag that said Dolores. She refilled my coffee without being asked and lingered for a moment. "Long drive?" she asked. "Very long. Boston to California." She whistled low. "That's a haul. Running from something or running to something?" I thought about it. Both, I think. Dolores nodded like she understood perfectly. "Aren't we all, honey? Aren't we all?" Before I left, I asked if I could take her photograph. She looked surprised, then laughed, a warm, raspy sound. "Nobody's wanted to take my picture in 30 years. What do you want an old waitress for?" "Because you're beautiful," I said. "And because someone should see you." She let me take the photo. When I showed it to her on the camera's screen, she got quiet for a long moment. "I look important," she said finally. "You are important." She hugged me before I left. A stranger's hug, but it meant more than any embrace I'd received from my family in years. On the fifth day, I called Aunt Jenny from a gas station just past the Arizona-California border. "I'm about 8 hours out," I said. "Your room is ready. Fresh sheets, ocean view, and Daniel wants to meet you tomorrow afternoon, if you're up for it." My stomach flipped. "Tomorrow? That's so fast!" "Ellie." Her voice was warm, certain. "You've been waiting 3 years for this. It's not fast. It's finally." When I crossed into California, something shifted inside me. The landscape changed. Desert giving way to mountains, mountains giving way to valleys, and then, suddenly, impossibly, the Pacific Ocean appeared on my left, vast and endless and blue, stretching to the horizon like a promise. I rolled down my window and breathed salt air for the first time in my life. I cried then, not from sadness, from relief, from the overwhelming sensation of possibility, from the realization that I was actually doing this, actually changing my life, actually becoming someone new. Or maybe not someone new, maybe just finally becoming myself. At 7 p.m. on the fifth day, I pulled into the gravel driveway of the Ceramic Cup. It was exactly how Aunt Jenny had described it in our Sunday calls. A small building on a quiet street, 2 blocks from the beach. Blue shutters, hand-lettered sign, window boxes overflowing with lavender, the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a storybook, not real life. Aunt Jenny was waiting on the porch. She was 63 years old, with silver hair cut short and practical, and hands permanently stained with clay. She wore a paint-splattered apron over jeans and a simple blouse, and her smile when she saw me was the warmest thing I'd felt in years. "Welcome home," she said, opening her arms. I walked into her embrace and held on tight. For the first time in 32 years, somewhere actually felt like home. Carmel by the Sea is the kind of place that doesn't feel real at first. Cottages with storybook rooftops, art galleries on every corner, ocean mist rolling through cypress trees. The whole town felt like a painting someone had dreamed into existence, all soft edges and warm light and the constant whisper of waves in the background. My room was upstairs from the cafe, small but bright. A bed with a white quilt, a desk by the window, and a view of the Pacific that made my chest ache with something I couldn't name. "You'll work the morning shift," Aunt Jenny explained over dinner that first night. 6 to noon. After that, your time is yours. "I don't know how to thank you for this." She waved her hand. "Don't thank me. Just build something. That's payment enough." The next morning, I woke before dawn. I tied on an apron, not the world's best aunt one I'd left behind, just a simple canvas apron with the ceramic cup embroidered in blue thread, and learned how to make pour-over coffee. Customers came and went, locals who knew Jenny by name, regulars who ordered the usual without specifying what that meant, tourists charmed by the homemade scones and the pottery displayed on shelves along the walls. I took orders, wiped tables, chatted with strangers who had no idea I'd run away from my entire life 5 days ago. By noon, I'd made $37 in tips. I'd smiled more than I had in months. And at 2 p.m., I had an appointment at Coastal Light Gallery. Daniel Thorne looked nothing like I expected. I'd imagined someone intimidating. Slicked back hair, designer suit, the kind of gallery owner who made artists feel small. Instead, the man who greeted me at Coastal Light Gallery was tall and weathered, with silver hair and kind eyes. He wore a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and he smiled like we were already friends. "Eleanor Hartwell," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm but warm. "Jenny has told me a lot about you, but the work speaks for itself." He led me through the gallery, white walls, natural light, photographs and paintings displayed with careful precision. This was a serious place, a place where art mattered. "I've looked through your Instagram extensively," Daniel continued as we walked. "The Invisible Women series is extraordinary. There's a truth in those images that most photographers spend decades trying to capture." I didn't know what to say. I'd never heard anyone describe my work that way. He stopped in front of a large monitor displaying my portfolio. On screen was a photograph I'd taken 2 years ago, the elderly woman waiting alone at the bus stop. Her face a map of lines and quiet dignity. "This is the one that made me reach out," Daniel said. "There's something in her eyes. Patience, maybe. Or resignation. It's heartbreaking." "She was waiting for a bus that came late," I said quietly. "She'd been standing there for 40 minutes. Nobody stopped to offer help. Nobody even looked at her." Daniel nodded slowly. "You see people, Ellie. Really see them. That's a gift." He turned to face me, and his next words landed like a key turning in a lock. "I'd like to offer you a solo exhibition, 15 pieces, opening in 6 weeks. We'll cover printing, framing, and marketing. You keep 60% of all sales." The room seemed to tilt. I reached out to steady myself on nothing. "A solo exhibition? Your work deserves to be seen, Ellie. Really seen. Not on a phone screen, on a wall, printed large where people can stand in front of it and be moved." He handed me a folder, a contract, simple and straightforward. I read through it with shaking hands while Daniel waited patiently. "Artist, Eleanor Hartwell, my name, in print, on a legal document that recognized my work had value, that I had value." "The exhibition title," Daniel said, pointing to a line near the bottom. "I'd like your approval. We're proposing Invisible Women, Portraits of the Overlooked." Invisible Women. "It's perfect," I whispered. I signed my name on the line. I walked out of that gallery holding the contract against my chest like a treasure. The afternoon sun was warm on my face. The ocean glittered in the distance, and for the first time in my life, I had proof, actual, physical proof, that I wasn't nothing, that I had never been nothing. For 3 years, I'd built something in the shadows, something beautiful and true and entirely my own. And now, finally, it was about to step into the light, I found a bench overlooking the water and sat down. The contract was still in my hands. I read my name again, just to make sure it was real. Eleanor Hartwell, artist. A seagull cried overhead. The waves rolled in and out, eternal and indifferent, and I sat there on that bench in a town I'd barely known existed a week ago, and let myself feel something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The first week in Carmel felt like learning to breathe again. I woke each morning before dawn, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The window of my small room faced east, and I'd lie in bed watching the sky shift from black to purple to pink to gold, the Pacific Ocean catching fire with the sunrise. In Boston, I'd always woken to alarms, to obligations, to the weight of someone else's expectations pressing down on me before my eyes were even open. Here, I woke to silence, to possibility, to a day that belonged entirely to me. By 5:30, I'd be downstairs in the ceramic cup, learning the morning routine. Aunt Jenny had run this cafe for 20 years, and she had systems for everything. The exact temperature for pour-over coffee, the precise timing for her famous blueberry scones, the way she arranged the pastries in the display case so the light caught them just right. People eat with their eyes first, she told me, adjusting a croissant by millimeters. Make it beautiful, and they'll taste it better. I thought about that a lot. How presentation shapes perception. How the way something looks determines how people experience it, and how that applied to people too. My whole life, I'd presented myself as the helpful one, the accommodating one, the one who didn't need attention. And my family had perceived me accordingly. Maybe it was time to present myself differently. The cafe opened at 6 a.m., and the regulars started appearing almost immediately. There was Harold, a retired fisherman who came every morning for black coffee and the newspaper. He sat at the same table by the window, read every section front to back, and left exactly 90 minutes later with a wave and a $2 tip. There was Mrs. Yamamoto, a tiny woman in her 80s who ordered green tea and a single scone, then spent 2 hours working on elaborate needlepoint projects while tourists cooed over her work. There was the group of artists who gathered in the back corner on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, drinking espresso and arguing about technique and meaning and whether anyone could really call themselves an artist if they hadn't suffered enough. "You'll be joining us soon." One of them, a painter named Victor with paint-stained fingers and a wild gray beard, said to me one morning, "Jenny told us about your exhibition. Big deal, getting a show at Coastal Light. Daniel doesn't take just anyone." I didn't know what to say to that. The idea that I belonged among these people, these real artists, still felt like a costume I was trying on, not sure if it fit. "I'm still figuring things out," I said. Victor laughed. "We all are, dear. That's what being an artist means. You figure things out until you die, and then someone else figures out what you meant." The morning shift ended at noon, and then my time was my own. I'd walk through town, camera in hand, relearning how to see. Carmel was different from Boston, smaller, quieter, saturated with beauty in a way that felt almost aggressive. Every street corner looked like a postcard. Every garden could have been painted by Monet. But I wasn't interested in the obvious beauty. I was interested in the edges, the homeless man who slept under the cypress trees near the beach, invisible to the tourists who walked past with their ice cream cones and shopping bags. The immigrant workers who maintained the gorgeous gardens, trimming hedges and planting flowers while wealthy homeowners lounged on patios 10 feet away, never making eye contact. The elderly artists who couldn't afford galleries anymore, selling watercolors from folding tables while the world moved past without stopping. Invisible people, even in paradise. I photographed them all. 3 weeks after I arrived, Aunt Jenny took me to visit my studio. Studio was a generous word. It was a converted storage room above a yarn shop, barely big enough for a desk, a computer, and my editing equipment. The ceiling sloped at a steep angle, and if I stood in the wrong spot, I'd bump my head, but it had a window that overlooked the ocean, and it was mine. I rented it last year for a photographer who never showed up, the yarn shop owner, a cheerful woman named Beatrice, explained. Paid 3 months up front and then vanished. Bad luck for her, good luck for you. I'll give you the same rate. The rate was more than I could afford on tip money alone. but Daniel had advanced me a small sum against future sales, enough to cover first and last month's rent. "This is where it gets real," Aunt Jenny said, watching me set up my laptop. "This is where you stop being someone who takes pictures and start being a photographer." "What's the difference?" She smiled. "Intent. A person who takes pictures captures what they see. A photographer creates what they envision. You've been doing the second one all along, you just didn't know it." 6 weeks. That's how long I had to prepare for the most important night of my life. Daniel and I met twice a week to review progress, discuss selections, argue about details. He was exacting but kind, pushing me to articulate things I'd never put into words. "Why this photograph?" he'd ask, pointing to an image I'd selected. "Tell me what you see." "It's a woman waiting for a bus." "I can see that. But why this woman? Why this moment? What are you trying to say?" I'd fumble for words, and he'd wait patiently while I found them. "She's been waiting for 40 minutes. Everyone walks past her like she's not there. She's invisible, but she's not nothing. Look at her hands. Look at how she holds her grocery bags, careful not to let them touch the dirty ground. She has dignity. She has a whole life. But nobody stops to see it." Daniel would nod, satisfied. "Now put that on the wall label. That's what people need to understand." 15 photographs from a catalog of hundreds. Choosing was agony. I spread prints across every surface of my tiny studio: floor, desk, windowsill, taped to the sloped ceiling. I'd stand in the middle and turn slowly, trying to see them as a whole, as a story, as a statement. Some photographs I loved but couldn't justify. A beautiful composition that didn't say anything beyond, "Look at my technique." A powerful subject whose face was slightly out of focus. An image that duplicated something another photograph said better. "Kill your darlings," Daniel said when I showed him my anguished face. "You're not abandoning them. You're just saying, 'Not this time.'" By the end of the first week, I had my 15. Each one a portrait of someone society overlooked. Each one a quiet accusation and a quiet celebration at the same time. The print lab in Monterey smelled like chemicals and possibility. I'd never had my work printed at this scale before. Some images would be 3 feet wide, large enough to feel confrontational. The technician, a soft-spoken man named George who'd been printing photographs for 40 years, walked me through paper options and finishes and the subtle differences in black and white tonal ranges. "Your shadows are beautiful," he said, examining one of my files on his calibrated monitor. "Most people crush their blacks. You've kept detail. This woman's face, you can see every line, every pore. It's intimate." "Is that good?" He looked at me like I'd asked if water was wet. "It's exceptional. You have the eye. I've seen a lot of work come through here, most of it forgettable. This isn't forgettable." When the first print came off the press, I actually cried. There she was, my bus stop woman, 3 feet tall and undeniable. You couldn't walk past her now. You couldn't pretend she wasn't there. She demanded to be seen. "That's the goal," George said, handing me a tissue. "Make them look. Make them feel." Simple black frames. Daniel's insistence. "Let the work speak," he said. "Fancy frames are for artists who need help. You don't need help." The framing shop was run by an elderly Japanese man named Mr. Tanaka, who had been framing art in Carmel for 50 years. He handled each print like it was sacred, measuring with precision, cutting mats with steady hands. "Good work," he said, examining my bus stop photograph. "Sad work. True work." "Is sad a problem?" He shook his head. "Sad is honest. Happy is easy. Sad is brave." Daniel and I walked through the gallery a dozen times, arguing about placement. "The bus stop woman should be the centerpiece," he said. "First thing people see when they walk in." "I think she should be last," I countered. "Build to her. Let people journey through the others first, so when they reach her, they understand what they're seeing." We compromised. She'd be visible from the entrance but positioned so you had to walk through the exhibition to reach her. A destination, a culmination. The other 14 photographs would line the walls in a specific sequence, starting with the most distant subjects, the street vendor seen from across the road, and moving progressively closer, ending with tight portraits, faces filling the frame. a journey from observation to intimacy. "You're good at this," Daniel said, surprised. "Most first-time artists have no spatial sense. They just want their work on walls, any order." "I've spent my whole life arranging other people's things," I said. "Tables for dinners, presents under trees. Might as well be good for something." Grace Holloway arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. She was a journalist for Carmel magazine, mid-40s, silver streak in her dark hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. Daniel had arranged the interview. Grace had agreed because she trusted his taste. "So," she said, settling into a chair at the ceramic cup with a recorder between us, "tell me about invisible women." I'd been dreading this moment. The idea of explaining myself, of being seen in that way, made my stomach clench. But I'd practiced with Aunt Jenny. I'd written and rewritten my artist statement. I knew what I wanted to say. I just wasn't sure I could say it out loud. "The series started after a breakup," I began. "Someone I loved told me I was always just there, like furniture, like I didn't really exist. And at first, I thought the problem was me, that I was somehow deficient, not interesting enough, not visible enough." Grace nodded, scribbling notes. But then I started looking around and I realized I wasn't alone. There are millions of people who society treats as invisible: the old, the poor, the plain, the ones who serve instead of being served. And I thought, what if I could make them visible? What if I could force people to see them? And the title? Why specifically women? "Because I am one," I said simply. "Because I know what it feels like. Not every subject is a woman, but the experience of invisibility, of being overlooked, undervalued, taken for granted, that's something women understand in their bones. We're taught from childhood to accommodate, to smooth things over, to make ourselves smaller. The subjects in my photographs haven't made themselves smaller. They've just been made smaller by a world that refuses to see them." Grace looked at me for a long moment. "That's going on the cover," she said. The gallery transformed overnight. I arrived the morning before the opening to find my photographs already mounted on the walls, perfectly lit, exactly as Daniel and I had planned. But seeing them there, in a real gallery, a space where real artists showed their work, was different from imagining it. "Having a moment?" asked a voice behind me. I turned to find a young woman about my age, dark skin, natural hair pulled up in a colorful wrap, paint-stained jeans that suggested she'd come straight from her own studio. She was smiling like she understood exactly what I was feeling. "I'm Jamie," she said, extending a hand. "Daniel's assistant, also an artist. Also had my first show here 2 years ago and stood in this exact spot looking exactly like you do right now. How did your show go?" "Terrifying. Wonderful. Changed my life." She grinned. "Yours will too. Daniel doesn't take on projects he doesn't believe in. If he gave you these walls, you earned them." Jamie became my guide for the final preparations, helping me write wall labels, reviewing the guest list, explaining the strange etiquette of art openings. "People will say pretentious things," she warned as we sat in the gallery's back office, surrounded by paperwork and empty coffee cups. "Smile and nod. Someone will definitely tell you what your own work really means, as if you hadn't made it. Just say, 'That's an interesting interpretation,' and move on." "Does that actually happen?" "Oh, constantly. At my first show, a man in a beret, an actual beret, I'm not making this up, spent 20 minutes explaining how my paintings were actually about capitalism when they were literally just portraits of my grandmother's garden." She rolled her eyes. "He bought 2 pieces, though, so I let him believe whatever he wanted." I laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't felt in months. Jamie was easy to be around. She didn't expect anything from me, didn't have any hidden agenda. She just liked art and liked talking about it and seemed to genuinely like me. It was such a foreign feeling, being liked for myself, not for what I could do for someone. "What if nobody comes?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. 50 people have already RSVP'd, including Mrs. Crawford. My stomach dropped. "Evelyn Crawford? The collector?" "The very same. She's kind of legendary around here. Owns about a quarter of the serious art in Monterey County. Donates to every arts organization within 100 miles. She rarely attends openings anymore. Bad hip, hates crowds, famously impatient with small talk. But Daniel sent her photos of your work, and she called him personally. Said she hadn't been this interested in new photography in years. I sat down heavily on a gallery bench, feeling lightheaded. Hey, Jamie sat beside me. That's a good thing. Mrs. Crawford has impeccable taste. If she's interested, it means your work is genuinely special. It means I might throw up from nerves. Also possible, there's a bathroom in the back. She grinned. Seriously, though, you've got this. Your work is good, better than good. All you have to do is show up and let people see it. That's the terrifying part, I admitted. I've spent my whole life not being seen, not being allowed to be seen. What if I don't know how? Jamie was quiet for a moment, considering. You know what I think? I think you've always known how to be seen. You just buried it so deep that you forgot it was there. So she gestured at the photographs being installed on the walls. But look at this work. Look at how you see other people. Really see them in a way most of us can't. That doesn't come from nowhere. That comes from someone who's been watching, waiting, paying attention their whole life. Someone who knows exactly what it feels like to be overlooked. She turned to face me directly. The difference now is that you're pointing the camera at yourself. Metaphorically speaking, you're saying, look at me, look at what I can do. And that's scary as hell. But it's also the bravest thing you can do. I felt tears prick at my eyes and blinked them back. When did you get so wise? 2 years of therapy and a really good art school professor. She laughed. Also, I've been where you are. Different circumstances, but the same fear. The first time you let people see your real self, not the version you've been performing, but the actual you, it feels like jumping off a cliff. And if you fall? Then you fall. And you get up, and you try again. She squeezed my hand. But more often than you'd think, you fly. The evening of August 15th arrived with a sunset that painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. I stood in my small room above the ceramic cup, staring at myself in the mirror. Navy dress, simple, elegant, professional. Hair down for once, styled into soft waves by Aunt Jenny, who had insisted. A touch of lipstick, small silver earrings I'd found at a vintage shop downtown. I looked like someone I didn't recognize. You look beautiful, Jenny said from the doorway. I look like I'm pretending to be someone else. Maybe. She came to stand beside me, meeting my eyes in the mirror. Or maybe you're finally letting yourself be who you've always been. The pretending was before, all those years of dimming yourself so others could shine. This is real. She pressed a glass of champagne into my hand. One for courage. Then we go. A coastal light gallery glowed like a beacon in the twilight. I could see people inside through the windows, moving, talking, holding glasses, looking at my photographs. My photographs, on walls, in a gallery, being seen. Ready? Jenny asked. No. Perfect. That means you care. Let's go. The next 2 hours were a blur of faces and names and conversations I could barely track. Daniel introduced me to collectors, critics, local artists, curious tourists who had wandered in from the street. I shook hands until my palm was sore. I answered variations of the same questions over and over. What inspired you? How long have you been photographing? Where do you find your subjects? I recited the answers I'd practiced until they flowed naturally, until I almost believed I belonged there. Mrs. Evelyn Crawford arrived at 7:30, a tiny woman in her late 60s with steel gray hair and pearls that probably cost more than my car. She moved slowly, leaning on a cane, but her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. She stopped in front of the bus stop photograph and stood there for 5 full minutes without speaking. I watched from across the room, my heart hammering. Finally, she turned and caught my eye, gestured for me to approach. Miss Hartwell, she said when I reached her. This woman. Tell me about her. I don't know her name, I admitted. I never spoke to her. I saw her from across the street, waiting for a bus that was late. She stood there for 40 minutes. Nobody stopped. Nobody acknowledged her. She was completely alone in a crowd of people. Mrs. Crawford nodded slowly. I knew a woman like this once. My mother, actually. After my father died, she became invisible. People who had fawned over her when she was a wealthy man's wife suddenly couldn't see her anymore. She'd walk into a room and no one would stand up. She'd speak and no one would listen. Her voice tightened. She spent the last 20 years of her life invisible. It killed her, not literally, but spiritually. Long before her body gave out, her spirit had been extinguished by being unseen. She turned back to the photograph. You've captured that. The quiet devastation of it. The dignity that persists anyway. She paused. I want this piece. Before I could respond, she gestured to Daniel, who appeared as if by magic. I'm purchasing this photograph, she told him, whatever the price. Daniel named a figure that made my head spin. $3,000. Mrs. Crawford didn't blink. Done. And I want to discuss a commission. I have a home in Big Sur. I'd like Miss Hartwell to photograph the coastline. I'm sure she'd be honored, Daniel began. Let her speak, Mrs. Crawford said, turning to me. Would you be interested, Miss Hartwell? I found my voice. Yes. I would be honored. She smiled, a small, tight expression that somehow conveyed genuine warmth. Good. My assistant will be in touch. She squeezed my hand briefly. Your mother must be very proud. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. By 8 o'clock, red dots had appeared beside 4 of my photographs. 4 pieces sold. $8,400 total, of which I would keep 60%, more than I'd made in 3 months of accounting work. For my art, for things I had created. I was standing near the back of the gallery processing this reality when the door opened and my world tilted on its axis. Brooke walked in first, still tanned from Hawaii, wearing a floral sundress completely wrong for an art opening. Tyler followed in a suit without a tie, phone already in hand. They both looked around the gallery with expressions I recognized, the look my family wore whenever they encountered something outside their understanding. Then Brooke saw me. Ellie! She rushed forward, arms outstretched, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Oh my God, we've been so worried about you. Mal, she pulled me into a hug I didn't return. We flew back from Hawaii early. Mom found your Instagram, and she figured out where you were, and we just had to come. 50 guests had stopped their conversations to stare. Brooke, I kept my voice level. This is unexpected. I know, but I couldn't let things stay the way they were. We're family, Ellie. Her eyes were wide, earnest, performing concern for the audience. You just disappeared, and we didn't know if you were okay, and I told you I was leaving. I told all of you. But we didn't think you meant it. Of course they didn't, because I'd never meant anything before. I'd always backed down, accommodated, made myself small enough to fit whatever space they allowed me. Tyler appeared at Brooke's elbow, nodding at me like we were business associates. Ellie, nice place. It's a gallery, I said. My gallery opening, the exhibition of my work. Brooke blinked, looking around at the photographs on the walls as if seeing them for the first time. You did all this? Since when do you do this? Since 3 years ago. You never asked. Aunt Jenny materialized at my side, a quiet wall of support. Across the room, Daniel and Jamie were watching, ready to intervene. Brooke lowered her voice, though not low enough. Ellie, I have news. I'm pregnant again. Number 3. And I really need you to come home. Tyler's work is insane right now. Mom isn't helpful with the kids. I need you. Not congratulations on the exhibition. Not your work is beautiful. Just need. Always their need. Brooke, I started, but before I could continue, the gallery door opened again. My parents walked in. My mother wore her Burberry trench coat, the one she saved for important occasions. My father stood behind her in a blazer, looking profoundly uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Diane Hartwell scanned the room until her eyes found me. Then she walked through my gallery like she owned it. Ellie. Her voice carried the same tone she'd used when I was 8 and had tracked mud onto her clean floors. We need to talk. You came all this way, I said evenly. Of course we did. You disappeared. You abandoned your family when we needed you most." Her voice trembled with righteous indignation. "And now I find you here, playing artist while your sister is pregnant and struggling. Brooke is pregnant and wealthy. She's not struggling. She's inconvenienced. Don't be cruel, Eleanor. This isn't like you." "You're right." I took a breath. "It isn't the me you wanted. The me you could count on to do whatever you asked. But that Ellie was never seen, Mom. She was just used." 50 pairs of eyes were watching now. The string quartet had stopped playing. Champagne glasses hung suspended in midair. The entire gallery had become an audience to the drama my family had brought to my doorstep. My mother recovered quickly, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a discreet volume. "Eleanor, your father and I flew across the country because we're concerned about you. This phase you're going through, it's gone on long enough. It's time to come home and be part of the family again." "I was never part of the family," I heard myself say. "I was the help. That's not—" "I have proof." The words fell like stones into still water. My mother's face went pale. My father shifted uncomfortably. Brooke looked between us, confusion giving way to dawning horror. "What proof?" Tyler demanded. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady, steadier than I expected. "The night of your anniversary party," I said, "I borrowed your laptop, Mom. Your email was still logged in, and I found a thread between you and Brooke about me." "Eleanor, let me read it." I kept my voice clear, loud enough to be heard throughout the gallery. "From Diane Hartwell to Brooke Hartwell Preston. Keep Ellie here to watch the kids. She doesn't have anything important to do anyway. Tyler was right. It's like having free help. She should be grateful we give her something to do." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. And Brooke replied, "Totally agree, Mom. She'll probably feel useful for once. It's kind of sad, honestly, but at least it works out for us." Silence. Absolute silence. I lowered my phone. "I'm not reading this to humiliate you," I said quietly. "I'm reading it so you understand why I left. You didn't see me as family. You saw me as staff, and staff has the right to quit." My mother's mouth opened, closed, opened again. For the first time in my life, Diane Hartwell was speechless. But others weren't. "Excuse me." Mrs. Crawford's voice cut through the silence like a blade. She stepped forward, leaning on her cane, her eyes sharp as flint, as, "Did I understand correctly? This young woman's family called her free help?" Tyler stepped forward, his corporate composure cracking. "With respect, ma'am, this is a private family matter. It stopped being private when you walked into her exhibition and tried to drag her back to a life of servitude." Mrs. Crawford's voice could have frozen water. "I just paid $3,000 for this young woman's art. I didn't pay that for someone who takes snapshots as a hobby. I paid it because she has genuine talent, genuine vision, and, from what I can see, genuine courage to stand here and tell the truth." More murmurs of agreement from the crowd. Someone actually clapped. "This is ridiculous," my mother hissed. "Eleanor, I don't know what you've told these people." "She told me her story." Grace Holloway, the journalist, stepped forward, notebook in hand. "And I found it compelling enough to feature in next month's magazine. Cover story, in fact. The artist who learned to see herself. Though this," she gestured at my family, "might make for an even more interesting angle." My mother looked around the room as if finally realizing what she'd walked into. This wasn't her turf. These weren't people who would defer to her social status or swallow her version of events. These were strangers who had no reason to take her side, and every reason now to take mine. "Ellie," my father spoke for the first time since arriving. His voice was quiet, tired. "Can we please discuss this privately?" "No," I said. For 32 years, I was privately overlooked, privately dismissed, privately erased. Everything that happened to me happened behind closed doors, where no one could see. Tonight, for the first time, people are seeing the truth, and I won't hide it anymore. Daniel stepped forward, positioning himself beside me. "I think," he said calmly, "it might be best if the Hartwell family continued this conversation elsewhere. This is an art opening, not a family therapy session. My mother drew herself up, preparing for a counterattack, but before she could speak, something unexpected happened. My father put his hand on her arm. "Diane," he said quietly, "let's go." She stared at him. "Richard, we can't just—" "We've done enough." His voice cracked on the word. "Look at her, Diane. Look at what she built. Look at this room full of people who came to see her work. And look at us, barging in, demanding she come back to— what? Wash our dishes? Watch our grandchildren?" He looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time. "I don't know when we lost you, Ellie. I don't know if it was our fault or just something that happened over time. But you're not lost anymore. You're right here, and you're extraordinary." His voice broke on the last word. Then he turned and walked toward the door. My mother hesitated, her face cycling through emotions too fast to track. Finally, she followed him, her heels clicking sharply against the gallery floor. Brooke lingered, tears streaming down her face. "Ellie," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't realize." "You didn't ask," I said. "You never asked." "I know. I know that now." She wiped her eyes. "Is it too late?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I'm not coming back to Boston. I'm not going to be your childcare. If you want to be in my life, it has to be different. It has to be equal." She nodded, still crying. "I understand." Tyler appeared behind her, looking shell-shocked. For once, he didn't have his phone in his hand. "We should go," he said quietly. Brooke reached out as if to hug me, then stopped herself. Can I call you? Not to ask for anything, just to talk?" "Maybe," I said. "Someday. Not yet." She nodded again, and then they were gone, following my parents out into the California night. The gallery door closed behind them, and then, impossibly, someone started to clap. It was Mrs. Crawford. Then Aunt Jenny joined her. Then Daniel, then Jamie, then the entire room. 50 people applauding not my photographs, but me. For standing up, for telling the truth, for finally being seen. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did both. Jamie pressed a fresh glass of champagne into my hand. "You okay?" "I have no idea," I admitted. "That's the right answer." She grinned. "Now come on, you have 4 more pieces to sell and about 30 people dying to talk to you. The night's not over yet." By the time the gallery closed at 10 p.m., I had sold 8 of 15 photographs. 8 pieces. $14,000 total. $8,400 for me. Daniel handed me the printout of the evening's transactions as the last guests filtered out. "Not bad for a first show," he said, smiling. "Especially one with unexpected family drama." I stared at the numbers. $8,400. More than I'd made in 3 months of accounting work. For art. For my art. "Mrs. Crawford wants to commission a piece," Daniel continued. "Big Sur coastline, as she mentioned, and Grace's article is going to bring more attention. I've already had 2 inquiries about your next exhibition." "Next exhibition?" "We're scheduling it for spring, a new series. I have some ideas, but I want to hear yours first." He put a hand on my shoulder. "You did good tonight, Ellie. The work was excellent. But more importantly, you stood up for yourself. That's harder than making art." I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. "Go home," he said gently. "Rest. We'll talk next week." Aunt Jenny was waiting for me outside, wrapped in a shawl against the cool ocean breeze. "Ready?" "I don't know what I am." She laughed and linked her arm through mine as we walked back toward the ceramic cup. "You're an artist," she said. "A real one now, with sales and collectors and a magazine article. And more importantly, you're someone who finally told the truth out loud." "I didn't plan to do that," I admitted. "They just showed up and I couldn't pretend anymore." "Good. Pretending was killing you. I watched it happen for years, watched you shrink yourself to fit their expectations, watched you disappear a little more every time I saw you." She squeezed my arm. "Tonight, you stopped disappearing." We walked in silence for a moment, the sound of waves in the distance. "Do you think they'll change?" I asked. "My family?" "Some of them might. Your father surprised me tonight. That speech at the end, I don't think he planned it. He's never stood up to my mother before. Maybe seeing what he was about to lose finally woke him up." She paused. "But your mother, Brooke, they have more work to do. And whether they do it or not isn't your responsibility. You've done your part. You've told the truth and set your boundaries. Now it's up to them." We reached the ceramic cup. The windows were dark, the cafe closed for the night, but I could see the dim glow of a lamp in my room upstairs. "Thank you," I said, turning to face her. "For everything, for taking me in, for believing in me, for sending my work to Daniel and Grandma Dorothy, for all of it." Jenny's eyes glistened in the streetlight. "You don't need to thank me. You just need to keep going. Keep shooting, keep creating, keep being seen." She hugged me tight. "That's thanks enough." I climbed the stairs to my room and sat on the edge of my bed, still in my navy dress, still holding the printout of sales. My phone buzzed, a text from Jamie. "You were amazing tonight. Drinks tomorrow? I want to hear the full family backstory." I smiled and typed back, "Definitely." Another buzz. "Grace Holloway. Great material for the article. Thank you for being so honest. I think this story is going to resonate with a lot of people." Then, unexpectedly, a third message. From a number I didn't recognize at first, until I realized it was my father's cell phone, a number he'd never texted me from before. "Ellie, I'm sorry. I don't know if that means anything after everything, but I wanted you to know. Your work is beautiful. You are beautiful. I should have said that years ago." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I saved his number in my contacts, not as Dad, just as Richard, and set my phone aside. Tomorrow, I would think about what it meant. Tonight, I would sit with my victory, my truth, my beginning. Outside my window, the Pacific Ocean rolled endlessly toward the shore. The stars were bright, the air was salt-sweet, and somewhere in this small town full of artists and dreamers, I had finally found my place. I unzipped my dress and let it fall, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat by the window with a cup of tea Jenny had left warming for me. For 32 years, I had been invisible. Tonight, 50 strangers had seen me, really seen me, and they had applauded. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph. It was something simpler and more profound. It was freedom. The morning after the exhibition, I woke to 17 missed calls. Most were from numbers I didn't recognize, journalists probably, or curious strangers who had somehow found my contact information. 3 were from Brooke, 2 were from my mother, and 1, surprisingly, was from a Connecticut area code I didn't immediately place. I ignored them all. Instead, I got dressed, went downstairs, and worked my shift at the ceramic cup like it was any other day. Harold came in for his black coffee and newspaper. Mrs. Yamamoto ordered her green tea and scone. The Tuesday artist group gathered in their corner, and this time they waved me over. "Heard about last night," Victor said, making room for me at their table. "Family drama at an opening. Very bold." "It wasn't planned." "The best drama never is." He pushed a cup of espresso toward me. "Welcome to the club, by the way. You're officially one of us now. An artist with a show, sales, and a scandal. You've arrived." I laughed despite myself. "I'm not sure that's something to celebrate." "Of course it is. Art without conflict is decoration. You've got something real to say, and last night you said it." He raised his cup. "To Eleanor Hartwell. May her second act be even more interesting than her first." The other artists raised their cups too, and I felt something warm spread through my chest. Belonging, acceptance, community. Things I'd never had before. The article in Carmel magazine came out 3 weeks later. Grace had been true to her word. It was the cover story. My face, looking out at the world with an expression I barely recognized. Confident, present, visible. The headline read, "The Artist Who Learned to See Herself." The article told my story in broad strokes, the years of family obligation, the secret photography practice, the breaking point, the exhibition. Grace had been careful to change certain details to protect privacy, but the truth was unmistakable, and the response was overwhelming. Emails flooded my inbox from strangers who had read the article, women who had been the helpful one in their families, men who had spent decades accommodating everyone else's needs, people who had felt invisible their whole lives and had never found the words to describe it. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for showing me I'm not. I'm 57 years old, and I just realized I've been living my mother's life, not my own. Your story gave me permission to change that. I cried reading this. I'm going to call my sister today and tell her I see her. I've been taking her for granted for years. Each message was a thread connecting me to someone I'd never met. Each one proved that my story, my pain, my struggle, my transformation, meant something beyond myself. I wasn't just visible now. I was seen. Carmel in October was golden. The summer tourists had thinned, leaving the town quieter, more intimate. Fog rolled in most mornings, burning off by noon to reveal skies so blue they hurt to look at. The cypress trees turned bronze at the edges. The ocean seemed calmer, more contemplative. My life had found a rhythm. Mornings at the ceramic cup, where I now knew every regular by name and order. Afternoons in my studio, editing photographs or working on new pieces for the spring exhibition. Evenings with Aunt Jenny, cooking dinner together, talking about art and life and the strange journey that had brought me here. I'd rented a small cottage 3 blocks from the cafe, my first real home of my own. It had a tiny kitchen, a bedroom with a window seat overlooking a garden, and a spare room I'd converted into a darkroom for film photography, a new medium I was exploring. The walls were bare except for one photograph. The bus stop woman, the first piece Mrs. Crawford had purchased. Daniel had made me a print as a gift. To remind you where you started, he'd said, and how far you've come. The commission for Mrs. Crawford took me to Big Sur for a week in late September. Her property sat on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, one of those places that seemed to exist outside of time, where the boundary between land and sky and sea blurred into something almost mystical. I spent 5 days wandering the coastline with my camera, capturing the light at different hours. The way the fog transformed the landscape. The stark beauty of rocks worn smooth by centuries of waves. Mrs. Crawford joined me for coffee on my last morning there. You work differently than I expected, she said, watching me review images on my laptop. Most photographers I've commissioned come in with a plan, a shot list, a vision they're trying to execute. You seem to be discovering. I don't know what I'm looking for until I find it, I admitted. Is that a problem? On the contrary, it's exactly what I wanted. She leaned closer to look at the screen. This one, the fog coming through the cypress trees. It looks like ghosts walking. That's what I thought too. Then that's the one I want printed, life-size, for the main hall. She smiled, a rare expression that transformed her stern face into something almost warm. You have a gift, Eleanor, not just for technique, but for seeing. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small again. The relationships I'd left behind were slowly, carefully being rebuilt. Not all of them. My mother and I hadn't spoken since the exhibition. She'd sent a few emails, stiff, formal things that never quite apologized but implied I should come to my senses and return to how things were. I deleted them without responding, but Brooke surprised me. Her first call came a week after the exhibition. I let it go to voicemail, not ready to engage, but her message wasn't what I expected. Ellie, it's me. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I wanted to say I'm sorry, really sorry. I've been thinking about what you said, about how I never asked what you were doing with your life. You were right. I didn't ask because I didn't think to ask, because I just assumed you were, I don't know, fine, available, there for me whenever I needed you. And that was selfish. I was selfish. I'm trying to be better. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I wanted you to know I'm trying. I didn't call back that day or the next, but eventually I did. Our conversations were awkward at first, stilted, full of long pauses and careful word choices. We talked about her pregnancy, about the kids, about the weather, surface things, safe things. But slowly, we began to dig deeper. I've been thinking about why I treated you the way I did, Brooke said one evening, about a month after we'd started talking again. And I think I was scared. Scared of what? Of being like you. She paused. That sounds terrible, but hear me out. Mom always held you up as this cautionary tale. Don't end up like Ellie, alone and unmarried and without a real career. So I did everything different. Got married young, had kids, made sure I had the life she approved of, and somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as my sister and started seeing you as, I don't know, a warning, a reminder of what I was supposed to avoid. I didn't know what to say. Awful, I know. I'm in therapy now. Did I tell you that? Tyler thought I was being dramatic, but after the exhibition, after seeing what you'd built while I was so busy looking down on you, I realized I needed help to figure out why I became someone who could write those emails, who could treat her own sister like staff. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly. Not yet. But something softer. Something like the beginning of understanding. I'm glad you're getting help, I said finally. Me too. She took a breath. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I know that has to be earned, but I wanted you to know I'm working on it, on becoming someone worth forgiving. We talked for another hour that night, about childhood memories, about the roles we'd fallen into, about the family patterns that had shaped us both. By the time we hung up, something had changed between us. We weren't sisters again. Not yet. But we were two people trying to understand each other for the first time. That was a start. The phone call from Grandma Dorothy came on a Tuesday afternoon in late October. I was in my studio, editing photographs from the Big Sur Commission, when my phone rang with that unfamiliar Connecticut number. This time I answered. Eleanor? Her voice was thinner than I remembered from that call at my parents' house, frailer somehow. It's your grandmother. Grandma Dorothy. Is everything okay? Oh, I'm fine. Old and creaky, but fine. She chuckled softly. I called because I have something to say, and at my age I've learned not to put things off. Can you talk? Of course. I heard her settle into what I imagined was her favorite chair, the one by the window in her room at the assisted living facility. I've been thinking about you a great deal since that night at your parents' house, since I made that phone call. And there are things I should have said then, things I should have said years ago, that I never found the courage to voice. Grandma? Let me finish, dear. At 89, I've earned the right to ramble. I smiled despite the nervous flutter in my chest. Okay. When your mother married your father, I had reservations. Diane was ambitious, status-conscious. Not bad qualities in themselves, but I worried about how they might manifest in a family setting. I worried she would value achievement over love, appearance over substance. A pause. I was right to worry, but I didn't act on those concerns. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that Richard was an adult and could make his own choices, that Diane would mellow with time. She didn't mellow. No, she calcified. Grandma Dorothy's voice hardened briefly, then softened again. And you, my dear, were caught in the middle. I watched it happen, watched you become the responsible one, the overlooked one, the one who gave and never received. I watched you disappear piece by piece, year by year, and I said nothing. Why? The question came out before I could stop it. All those years of being invisible, and here was someone who admitted to seeing me, and doing nothing. Fear, she said simply. Fear of causing conflict. Fear of being cut off from the family. Fear of being seen as a meddling old woman who couldn't let her children make their own mistakes. She sighed heavily. Your Aunt Jenny was braver than me. She spoke up and your mother pushed her away. I saw what that cost her, years of exile from the family, and I was too cowardly to risk the same fate. But you called that night, at the anniversary party. Yes, finally. After 3 decades of silence, I finally found my voice. She laughed bitterly. Do you know what changed? I saw your photographs. Jenny sent them to me, and I sat in my room looking at them for hours. All those invisible women you captured, the lonely, the overlooked, the forgotten, and I realized something terrible. What? I had let you become one of them. My own granddaughter, and I had watched her be erased by her family, and I had done nothing to stop it. Her voice cracked. I've made many mistakes in my life, Eleanor, but that silence, that cowardice, that's the one I regret most. I didn't know what to say. Tears were streaming down my face, but I didn't wipe them away. I'm not telling you this to make excuses, Grandma Dorothy continued. There are no excuses. I'm telling you because you deserve to know that you were seen. Even when it felt like no one noticed you, I noticed. I saw the girl you were and the woman you were becoming, and I admired you, your patience, your kindness, your quiet strength. I just never told you, and that was wrong. Grandma, I'm also telling you because I want you to understand something important. What happened to you? The invisibility, the erasure, the slow diminishment of your selfhood. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't because you were lacking in some way. It was because the people around you failed to see what was right in front of them. We failed. Not you. Never you. The tears came harder now, sobs I couldn't contain. And finally, she said, her voice strengthening, I'm telling you because I am so incredibly proud of you. What you've done, leaving, starting over, building a life on your own terms, that takes courage I never had. Your mother is still telling anyone who will listen that you've lost your mind. Your father mopes around like someone died. But you? You're living, Eleanor. Really living, maybe for the first time. And that's the greatest revenge against invisibility there is. I wiped my eyes, trying to collect myself. I don't want revenge, I said. I just want to be seen. I know, dear. And you are. By me. By your Aunt Jenny. By all those people who came to your exhibition. By readers of that magazine article. By strangers who will never meet you but who see themselves in your story. She paused. Visibility isn't about fame or attention. It's about being witnessed. It's about knowing that your existence matters, that your story is worth telling, that someone, somewhere, would notice if you disappeared. You would have noticed. Yes, she said quietly. I would have. I should have done more to make sure you knew that. We talked for another hour. About her life, the things she'd never told anyone, the regrets she carried, the wisdom she'd earned too late. About my childhood, memories I'd forgotten or suppressed, moments when she'd seen me struggling and had wanted to intervene but hadn't. By the end, something had healed between us. Not completely. Some wounds take more than a conversation to mend, but enough. Enough to build on. I want you to know something, I said before we hung up. That phone call you made the night I told my parents I was leaving, it mattered. It made a difference. It showed me that someone in my family actually saw what was happening to me, that I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. I should have made that call years ago. Maybe. But you made it when it mattered most, and I won't forget that. Grandma Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. Come visit me sometime, she said finally. I'm not getting any younger, and I'd like to see your face before I go. The real thing, not just photographs. I will, I promised. Soon. Good. I could hear the smile in her voice. And Eleanor, keep making art. Keep being seen. It suits you. The email from my father arrived a week after my conversation with Grandma Dorothy. It was longer than his previous message. Several paragraphs, carefully written, clearly labored over. I read it 3 times before I fully absorbed what he was saying. Ellie, I've started this email a dozen times and deleted it every time. Your mother says I should leave you alone, let you come to your senses. But I don't think you've lost your senses. I think you finally found them. I need to tell you some things that I should have said years ago, maybe decades ago. When you were young, I used to watch you help your mother with dinner. You couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, but you were so serious, so careful, so eager to do everything right. I remember thinking how lucky we were to have such a responsible child, how easy you made everything. I didn't realize until much later that easy isn't the same as happy. That a child who never complains might be a child who's learned that complaining doesn't work. That a daughter who always helps might be a daughter who doesn't know how to ask for help herself. I failed you, Ellie. Not in the dramatic ways your mother did, not with cruel words or visible dismissals, but in quieter ways that might be worse. I failed you by not noticing, by taking your helpfulness for granted, by letting your mother's priorities become my priorities without ever stopping to ask if they were right. I told myself I was keeping the peace, that stepping back was the wise thing to do. But wisdom that lets your child become invisible isn't wisdom at all. It's cowardice. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve it. But I want you to know that I see you now. I see what you built, what you escaped, what you became despite everything we put you through, and I am more proud of you than I've ever been of anything in my life. Your photographs are beautiful, but more than that, they're true. They show the world as it really is, full of people who deserve to be seen but aren't. I think you became an artist because you understood something the rest of us missed. You understood what it costs to be invisible, and you decided to spend your life making sure others don't have to pay that price. I'm not asking to be part of your life again. That's your choice, and I'll respect whatever you decide. But I wanted you to know that I love you. I always have, even when I did a terrible job of showing it. And I'm sorry for all of it. Dad. I sat with that email for a long time, reading and rereading, trying to untangle the knot of emotions it created. Anger was there. Anger at the years of neglect, the passivity, the failure to protect me from my mother's dismissiveness. But there was something else, too. Something that felt dangerously like hope. My father had never, in my entire life, written me anything like this. He'd never acknowledged the family dynamics, never admitted fault, never used the word sorry except in the most perfunctory ways. This was different. This was real. I didn't respond that day or the next. I needed time to process, to decide what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted with the man who had watched me disappear and done nothing to stop it. But I didn't delete the email. I saved it to a folder I'd created, labeled simply Family. Ma. It sat there alongside my father's first text message, Brooke's voicemails, and screenshots of my grandmother's article comments. Evidence of change. Evidence of possibility. Evidence that even the people who hurt us most can sometimes, if we're lucky, learn to see us differently. Spring came to Carmel with wildflowers and whale migrations and tourists eager to shed winter's weight. My second exhibition opened at Coastal Light Gallery on a Saturday evening in late March. Boundaries, 15 photographs exploring the edges of connection, the spaces between belonging and being alone, the invisible lines that separate people from each other. The series was more personal than Invisible Women. There were portraits, yes, but also landscapes. The Big Sur coastline, the fog-shrouded cypress trees, the threshold of my cottage door at different times of day. Images that spoke to my own journey, my own boundaries, my own process of learning where I ended and others began. Daniel had worried it might be too abstract, too interior. Trust me, I'd told him. People will understand. And they did. The opening drew twice as many guests as my first exhibition. Mrs. Crawford came and brought friends. Grace Holloway covered it for the magazine. The artist group from the cafe showed up in force. Victor leading them in a toast that made me laugh and cry simultaneously. Jamie stood beside me for most of the evening, providing running commentary on the guests. The woman in the red scarf has been staring at Threshold for 15 minutes. Either she's having a spiritual experience or she's fallen asleep standing up. That man just asked Daniel if you're single. Daniel told him to focus on the art. Oh my God, is that who I think it is? The gallery owner from San Francisco? He's talking to Mrs. Crawford and pointing at your work. This is huge, Ellie. By the end of the night, I'd sold 12 of 15 pieces. The gallery owner from San Francisco had left his card and a request to discuss a future exhibition in the city. And 3 different publications had reached out about features. But the moment that stayed with me happened near the end of the evening, when the crowd had thinned and the string quartet was packing up. I was standing alone in front of Threshold, a photograph of my cottage door, half open, light spilling out into the darkness, when I felt a presence beside me, Aunt Jenny. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there with me, looking at the image. "I remember when you first came to me," she said finally. "You were so lost, so convinced that you had nothing to offer, that you were nothing special." "I remember. And now look at you." She gestured at the gallery, at the red dots beside nearly every photograph, at the business cards and champagne glasses and evidence of success scattered everywhere. "You built this, all of it, from nothing but talent and courage and the willingness to finally let yourself be seen." "I had help," I said. "I had you. You had me in your corner, yes. But I didn't create any of this." She turned to face me fully. "I just gave you a place to land. You did everything else yourself." I looked at her, this woman who had taken me in without question, who had believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, who had shown me through her own life that there was another way to exist in the world. "Thank you," I said, "for everything." "Oh, don't thank me yet," she grinned. "I'm raising your rent next month. Successful artists can afford market rates." I laughed and she hugged me, and the gallery glowed around us like a promise. Today, I'm sitting in my studio, looking out at the Pacific. The Canon camera I bought from that pawn shop 3 years ago still sits on my shelf. Older now, battered from use, but still functional. Beside it is a newer model purchased with money I earned from my art. Both cameras matter. One taught me to see. The other proved that people saw me back. My third exhibition is scheduled for fall, a collaboration with Jamie combining her paintings with my photographs. We're calling it Witnessed. It feels right. The magazine article about my story has been shared thousands of times. Letters still arrive, emails from strangers who found themselves in my words, who are starting their own journeys toward visibility. As for my family, we exist in a new configuration now. My mother and I still haven't spoken. She sent a Christmas card with a generic message inside, no personal note. I sent one back, equally impersonal. Maybe someday we'll find our way to something more. Maybe we won't. I've made my peace with that uncertainty. Brooke and I talk every week now. Not about babysitting or obligations, about our lives, our fears, our hopes. She's in therapy, working through the patterns our mother instilled in her. Last month, she sent me a photograph of Charlotte, the new baby, with a note. "I'm going to raise her to see people, really see them, the way you taught me." My father and I have started exchanging emails regularly. Short messages at first, then longer ones. Last week, he wrote to tell me he'd started volunteering at a literacy program, teaching adults to read. "Invisible people," he wrote. "I never noticed them before. Now I can't stop noticing." And Grandma Dorothy, I visited her in Connecticut last month. We sat in her room for an entire afternoon, looking through old photographs, trading stories, making up for lost time. She's 90 now and moving slower, but her mind is still sharp. "I have one regret," she told me before I left. "I wish I'd spoken up sooner, given you one more decade of being seen." "You gave me the rest of my life," I said. "That's enough." She cried. I cried. We held each other in that small room in Connecticut, two women who had finally learned how to see each other clearly. The other day, I was going through old files on my computer and found a photograph I'd almost forgotten, a self-portrait taken in the mirror of my Boston apartment years ago. The woman in that image looked exhausted, defeated, like she was waiting for permission to exist. I deleted it. That woman is gone now. In her place is someone who takes up space, who creates beautiful things, who says no when she means no and yes only when she chooses. Someone who finally let herself be seen. That's the real story. Not revenge, not triumph, just freedom. The freedom to exist fully in the world, to create without apology, to love and be loved on equal terms, to walk into a room and know, really know, that your presence matters. I used to be invisible. I used to think that was my fault, my failing, my destiny. Now I know the truth. Invisibility was never about me. It was about a world, a family, a society, a set of expectations that refused to look. But I looked anyway. I looked at the invisible women at bus stops and coffee counters and janitors' closets. I looked at them and I made them visible. And somewhere in that process, I learned to look at myself, to see myself clearly, flaws and all, worthy and whole. That's what my art is really about. Not just seeing others, though that matters, but learning to see yourself, learning that you deserve to be witnessed, that your story is worth telling, that your existence, quiet or loud, conventional or unconventional, matters. Outside my window, the Pacific Ocean stretches to the horizon. The sun is setting, painting the water in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere in the distance, a whale breaches, a dark shape rising from the depths, visible for one glorious moment, then gone. I pick up my camera, not because anyone asked me to, not because anyone expects it, just because I want to. And that, after everything, is the greatest freedom of all.